Let's get into a brief history of how the commercial egg laying industry was born. Domesticated fowl has been around for centuries. We can look at hieroglyphics and read, ancient writings about how civilizations were built around agriculture and animal farming. Livestock is really important to humans. It allowed humans to explore and travel. You don't know if you're going to be able to plant plants wherever you're traveling to, so you bring livestock to ensure your survival. Also, humans that live in harsher climates, whether you're talking about the Arctic or you're talking about the Sahara Desert, humans rely on hunting, fishing, livestock, and animals to ensure survival. So let's start with the 1920s, 1930s. Farmers and people had these small flocks of hens that would lay eggs either on small farms or their backyards. Chickens were raised outdoors. They had a coop for nesting. They would forage, and they would help on the bigger farms with their place in crop rotation. With mass production gaining popularity in the United States, you had a lot of farmers that increased their flock size in hopes to increase their production of eggs so they can make more of a profit. Let's go back to the early 1800s and 1900s when people used to shop in farmers markets like the farmers markets we have now. People set up their booths, they show their vegetables or their products, and you go around the farmer's market and you buy what you need. In addition to that, people shopped at retail shops, whether that was a butcher or a bakery, so specialty retail shops. For kind of like your canned goods and stuff like that, you would go to this food mart, bodega type situation where you'd walk up and give your list to the clerk, and they would go in and they'd gather all the grains and canned foods you need, and you would pay them, and you'd be on your way. In 1916, the first supermarket was born, and that changed everything. First of many supermarkets popping up all over the place, becoming very popular in the United States. There was an increased demand for eggs to fill up the shelves at these supermarkets. To meet the demand and capitalize on this opportunity, farmers continued to increase their flock size, and they notice problems right away. With a flock size bigger than normal, the pecking order gets confusing. It's harder for the birds to identify the higher and lower birds. This causes more pecking, feather picking, and bullying amongst the birds. In addition to that, overcrowding also forces the hens to fight for space, fight for food, fight for water. So there's even more pecking and bullying and more of this aggressive behavior. The worst part about this is the weaker birds suffer. They don't get the same access to food and water and space, so they become weaker and weaker and weaker. Predators and harsh weather is another challenge with having your flock outside. We're looking at a 40% mortality rate. So this is where the idea of moving hens indoors came from. Being able to protect them from predators and protect them from harsh weather cut down the mortality rate considerably. Now that you have a massive amount of hens trapped indoors, you now have to consider waste management as a huge issue. The hens are defecating on the floor that they are living on and laying eggs on. Let's go to the 1940s. How are they going to deal with this new list of problems from increasing flock size and moving them indoors? You get the introduction of the battery cage, the absolute worst animal abuse going on in the livestock industry to date. Extreme confinement for a prolonged period of time is just one issue with these cages. So what's a battery cage? The battery cage system is a system of cages that are about 18 inches by 20 inches, wire caging. They house 4 and in some cases up to 10 hens in each cage. Let's talk about this. Why was this idea so good in 1931? We had talked about sanitation being an issue. With the wire mesh on bottom, and being raised off the floor, the poop now drops below them on the floor and lowers contamination rates. These cages are tilted, so now the eggs roll out. You can cut down on the amount of workers, save money. There's no hierarchy system now that these birds are separated off into cages, so that actually lowers the pecking death rate. Feeding is more regulated. The weaker hens don't have to compete for food and water. Flock sizes are now reaching 16,000 or more. Let's go to 1960. We see a move from large farm flocks to commercial production and factory farms. They're going from the farms into these battery cages into buildings now. Unfortunately, battery cages become the dominant way of egg production in this country. Now these hens are in something so unnatural, they don't even know they're hens. So with that comes more issues. To prevent aggressive behavior due to deficient personal space and extreme confinement, factory farms implement a couple new practices. Beak trimming, where they use a laser and they clip the top section of the beak, make it shorter than the bottom to prevent pecking, as well as low light and darkness to discourage activity amongst the hens. Other methods adopted to increase profits and productivity are artificial atmosphere to prevent natural molting so they can do a continuous egg laying cycle for the first year. Then a period of starvation to induce a short period of forced molting in preparation for the second cycle of egg laying. All right, I was born in 1986. In 1990, I was 4 years old. 1990! In 1990, 75% of the world and 95% of America's egg-laying hens are kept in cages. So nowadays we're seeing a steady decline in caged hens. So that's how we got here. Now where are we going? Nowadays you have some supermarket chains and food chains, food companies that are pledging to go cage-free, and you're seeing a rise of cage-free egg producers. We're also starting to see a movement toward pasture-raised, free-range, organic eggs. There's still many problems with cage-free factory farm systems, but we Americans got to start somewhere, and abolishing battery cages is where we need to start. Continue to pressure large food chains to take a stand, support the ones that do, push for legislation to ban the use of these cages, and we need to stop buying caged eggs ourselves. Stop supporting products that use caged eggs. We got to take a stand. That's a brief overview of how we got here.